Title IX is a federal law. It came about in 1972, and it is a law that it prohibits discrimination based on sex and gender. There have been quite a few changes to the jurisdiction of Title IX. The new regulations have significantly limited that jurisdiction. So the first piece is they changed the definition of sexual harassment. Conduct that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. This is a big difference because before the definition was severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive. So they changed the or to and, so it has to meet all three of those now for it to constitute a sexual harassment. The second definition that they have included is quid pro quo, or this for that. And so they have that one in there. And then the third kind of definition for sexual harassment is what we think of as the big four under VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act. And so when we think of the big four, it's sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, and stalking. So the interesting piece is for quid pro quo or the big four, it doesn't have to meet the severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive definition. And so what they have said was one incident of any of those is sufficiently severe, so then it doesn't have to meet that other definition. So that's just for the definition for jurisdiction. They changed quite a bit more when it comes to jurisdiction. Before, we were able to address conduct that happened off campus. Now, under Title IX, we're only able to address conduct that happens within UNM's education program or activity. So if it's happening during class, if it's happening on campus, it also has to be against someone in the United States. So for study abroad programs, if it happens in a different country, it doesn't count under Title IX anymore. We do have control over buildings that UNM owns or has some control over. So sorority and fraternity houses, Lobo Village, those are all places where UNM exercises some type of authority. So we'll be able to investigate them under Title IX for those pieces. The other part for jurisdiction is at the time that a complaint is filed, the victim or the complainant, as we call them, has to be either participating in or attempting to participate in UNM's programs or activities. So if something happened to someone and they wanted to wait until they graduated because it was just too much to handle during that time, it wouldn't fall under Title IX anymore for that jurisdiction reason. And so they have, it's not just the definition, but then there's the geography pieces that really have limited what we can do under Title IX. So the responsible employee policy is not going to change. That was something that the Department of Education left up to institutions to decide what we wanted that to look like. And given all the other large-scale changes, we said, great, this is one thing that we can keep the same. And we also want to do that so then if people are experiencing some type of sexual harassment or misconduct and we get the report, the first thing we want to do is send out resources so that they do feel connected and they can continue to be successful. All of our cases that we've had in the past, not just for Title IX, all UNM kind of investigations, they all use the preponderance of the evidence standard. So more likely than not, 51% something happened. For a while, there was some whisper that that was going to change. The new regulations let schools decide, again, which one they want to use, but whichever one they do use, they have to use across the board for all other situations on campus. So we were really fortunate in that we were already using the preponderance of the evidence all across the board. So that's not changing. We're going to continue with that standard of evidence. the investigators cannot do the analysis and make the determination of responsibility anymore. Now all of the cases that we investigate have to go to a live hearing. OEO is going to do the investigation. They'll do all the fact finding. And then once they're done gathering all that information, then the hearing will happen. And each of the parties will have to have an advisor who is going to do the cross-examination. So the advisors are going to ask the other parties questions. What is not allowed are the parties to ask each other questions. And this is really important, especially if we're talking about people who've experienced some type of violence. This is, we don't want to re-trigger or re-traumatize people. And so the advisors are going to be the ones that are going to be asking the questions. We will have a hearing officer who will hear the case and then make the determination as to whether or not there was a policy violation. The other piece to it is, and OEO has done this before, where we have informal resolutions. We do educational conferences. If something doesn't go to an investigation, but it's still a concern. So we've done that in the past. We can still do that, but they have put some limitations around how we do that now. For us to even start looking at informal resolutions, the victim or the complainant has to file a formal complaint saying, yes, I want you to investigate this. If they don't file that formal complaint, we can't have the conversation about informal resolutions. There are other limitations there where both parties have to agree to it. And so if the respondent or the alleged perpetrator doesn't agree to it, then we're in a little bit of a tricky place. So it's going to be really important for people to know from the beginning, this is what the process looks like. The other limitation with informal resolutions, and I appreciate this one, is if there is an allegation that an employee, so a faculty or staff member, sexually harasses a student, informal resolutions are not an option because of the power differential. Because then, like, this person with power can, force them into a process that they don't want. So that's one of the only instances where, or that's the only instance where an informal resolution is absolutely not an option. Other ones, it'll absolutely be a case by case. Because they've limited Title IX, what they have said is you can't address it under Title IX anymore, but you can address it other ways. We don't have a problem with that. We're just concerned about Title IX. So what we're doing is, for students, we're working with the Dean of Students right now and creating an MOU so that if it does fall, if it's still sexual misconduct of some sort, we're going to take those on and we're going to continue to investigate them and address them. It'll just be done under the Student Code of Conduct rather than Title IX. For employees, faculty, and staff, that's a little different because employees already have another civil rights law that prohibits discrimination. That one's called Title VII. And so if it's not Title IX, great, we'll just do it under Title VII. And OEO has already been doing that because that's another civil rights law. But before, we never really had to differentiate the two, because if it met the needs for Title IX, it also met the needs for Title VII. But now that they changed Title IX, it doesn't necessarily meet the same needs. So we'll still address those concerns. It'll just be called something different. Our policies aren't going to change much. They'll still be 2720 for our broader discrimination, and then 2740 is going to be the one much more specific to sexual harassment. So we're going to be able to still address these concerns. It's just we had to get really creative in how we do that. So I'm hoping and also guessing that for someone who might be going through the process, they won't know that all of those changes are happening. The only thing that they might identify as being different is that hearing. So we're trying to make everything behind the scenes as seamless and streamlined as possible so that it doesn't impact people if we have to dismiss it as Title IX, bring it back as student conduct, dismiss it as Title IX, bring it back as Title VII. So that's just some of the like behind the scenes stuff that we're doing.